Welcome, true crime lovers. This is Underage and Full of Rage. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Underage and Full of Rage, the podcast where the convicted are minors and their crimes are anything but. I am your host, Becky, and with me is my co-host, Adam.
Hello.
And today we have a terrible retelling of the horrendous murder of James Bulger. This tragic event took place back in the early 90s, and I chose this case because I believe this event was the first real memory I have of true crime, and I was wondering, what about you?
I have no idea what you're talking about right now.
Okay, well, then, do you have any memories of what your first true crime, anything? I guess that's a no.
I don't think so.
I was about to be like, dead air.
I don't know. I don't know.
Okay. Well, then, on that note, we will go ahead and get it started. You got to get all the jokes out now because this one's pretty damn dark. So, everybody, without further ado, the murder of James Bulger. The year is 1993, and on the 14th of February in Walton, Liverpool, England, brothers Terence and James Riley are down by the railroad tracks playing when they spot something that does not look right. I'm not really sure what they thought it might be, but from what they saw, they knew something was wrong. So in this case, it wasn't the typical, oh, it's a mannequin or something like that. These kids just knew that whatever they were looking at was not good. So, it would be determined that what the brothers do find, and what they did discover was, unfortunately, the brutally beaten and tortured body of 2-year-old James Bulger. So, 2 days prior to this, on February 12th, Denise Bulger, she goes by Fergus now, went to the Newstand Shopping Center, and in tow with her was her 2-year-old son, James. While their trip to the center started out as just another ordinary day, it would quickly turn into a day that Denise would never forget, and for reasons that would completely change the rest of her life and the lives of many. So while Denise and James are walking around innocently shopping, just like any other day, there happens to be 2 other boys who had also decided to go to the Newstand Shopping Center on February 12th. However, their decision to be there that day was for a very different purpose, a purpose that would soon shock the world. It is at this point that Denise and James are hand in hand at the butcher shop, and while being rung up, Denise proceeds to let go of her son's small hand so she is able to pay. And as soon as she finishes her transaction, she looks down to see that James is gone. In a matter of seconds, he was nowhere in sight. I couldn't even imagine. The sheer panic that you have to feel when, you turn away for a second and you turn back and you're expecting to see your kid and your kid's just not there.
I couldn't imagine that.
Seconds.
Yeah.
Seconds. Think about how long it takes to pay a cashier. That is seconds. In a moment, your life is completely uprooted. Completely turned upside down. Probably in the worst way possible. I physically cannot. That just makes me, hurt inside to think of that, if that ever happened.
Yeah.
So fortunately and unfortunately, it wouldn't be too long before Denise and the entire world would discover that what happened to her son was beyond anything anyone could have ever imagined. What we come to find is that those 2 boys who were seen hanging around the shopping center were buddies Robert Thompson and John Venables, both age 10. Robert and John attended school together and were only friends for a short period of time before committing this horrific act on February 12th, 1993. John had moved to the same school as Robert, and earlier in that school year, which is how the 2 became acquainted. And it was stated that John had to leave his old school due to repeated behavioral problems. One in particular included an incident where he was apparently caught trying to choke another boy. So, make of that what you will. When looking back at John's childhood, sources say it was one that was not terrible, but not necessarily ideal. His mother and father were separated. However, they lived very close to one another and pretty much co-parented to the best of their abilities. So since the parents had split custody, it was said that John would stay with his mom from Sunday to Thursday, and then he would go to his dad's for Friday and Saturday, and that was something he did every week. So he was pretty much yeah, he was being schlepped back and forth, but at the same time, he still had both parents being very active in his life, so, I mean, that's better than most.
Yeah, that's definitely better than a lot of situations.
And then, yeah, and he also had two other siblings who both had learning disabilities, and he himself was known to be hyperactive and act out a lot, but at the same time, I'm like, he's 10. Isn't that a 10-year-old boy?
Yeah, what does that mean?
So I could see the learning disabilities of the other siblings definitely affecting you too, because obviously they require more attention. So I could see maybe that could have also led to why he was hyperactive and acted out a lot, because he was desperate for attention.
That makes sense.
So, I mean, but again, it doesn't seem like it was too crazy or too bad, like some people we've like heard about having, terrible childhoods, where it's like a little more like, oh, so that's why you turned out that way. Getting back to it, though. So at some point, John, though, oh, yeah, that's right, I forgot about this. So at some point, John was suicidal, which is wild to think about because he was only 10 when this occurred. So I was wondering how old he actually was when he was contemplating killing himself, because
how do you contemplate that at like 10 years old or younger?
Yeah, because you would think that you wouldn't truly
even know what that is.
Yeah, like I'm just trying to even think like when that concept even came into my brain as a child. Like, I don't know, to be elementary school age is insanely young, and then adding the concept of ending your own life. Especially back then, I feel like kids weren't exposed to nearly as much as they are now. So it's just, to me, I just found it crazy that a child that young could be contemplating something like that.
Yeah, it's definitely insane for such a young kid.
Yeah. So he was, though, apparently suicidal as a result of his mother's struggles with depression. And it was stated also that out of both parents, she was known to be the harsher one. So multiple sources speak about how John was afraid of her as a child, which is interesting, and it kind of makes me wonder about what the relationship with his father was like. Like, I don't know if he was harsh too, but he was less harsh, because that could also add to a little bit of the dysfunction in his life and stuff like that. But I like mommy issues, obviously, but I wonder like if the dad was like a polar opposite situation and a safe place for him, or if the dad was just as bad, but just not as bad, in a sense, if that makes sense.
It was like slightly better.
Yeah, like it was like I could tolerate this a little bit more because he's not as terrible.
One slap instead of two type thing.
Yeah, exactly. So Robert, on the other hand, had a complete shit life. Not only was he bullied, but his home life was not good at all. In fact, several sources stated that his family was the epitome of dysfunctional family. And it seemed to be a series of shitty circumstances after another for the young boy. So, for instance, and I just know me, and I'm gonna laugh when I say this, but I'm not laughing because I'm like, haha. I'm laughing because it's just so uncomfortable. So, for instance, when he was 5 years old, his father had left the family, and then within a week after that, father abandoning them, this is not funny, Robert and his family's, their house had burnt down. That's not funny.
Oh, man.
But it makes me, because it's just, so uncomfortable. The thought of that is just awful. How much can one person take? Especially a 5-year-old. And not to mention, he's got siblings and his mom. That's just awful.
Yeah, that's horrible.
But I can't help it, this is where I'm a Claire Dunphy, because I giggle at awful things. So, now this doesn't negate, obviously, anything this kid did. But, I mean, again, you have to admit that it's pretty shitty to hear about a 5-year-old experiencing any of this. And so, I mean, Robert's mother, Anne, was kind of also known to be a heavy drinker, and it was stated that she could be seen down at the bar more than at home with her 7 children, which is a lot. Robert, who is the 5th child of the 7, not surprisingly, had a home life that was essentially chaotic and rough. And this is weird. So when I read it, I get sibling rivalry, but this took me a bit to wrap my head around, because I mean, it just sounds crazy. So apparently his brothers and him were constantly afraid of one another. I don't really know what that means, and would apparently batter and torture each other on a regular basis. There were reports of one brother threatening another with a knife. There were reports of suicide attempts. Not sure if that applies to Robert, his siblings, or the mother, all three. I don't know. There was just suicide attempts within the household. And apparently there was even reports of overdoses as well occurring at the household, but I'm not sure who that is in regards to strictly. But I think it's safe to say whatever was going on in that house, it was not good and certainly not stable for a young Robert Thompson, or any of the siblings for that matter. And although both boys did grow up in less than ideal households, at the same time their home lives were vastly different. The two did, however, share some similarities prior to meeting, mainly pertaining to behavioral issues, including a history of shoplifting, as well as both of them struggling academically with learning and their attendance at school, which I found weird about their attendance at school, because you're 10. Like, doesn't somebody have to make you go to school?
Yeah, that's kind of crazy. To think you could just, 10 years old, I'm just not going to school.
Yeah, like, nobody, like, you didn't have to get on the bus, or you didn't have to, like, I don't know, ditching school didn't become a thing until high school, so I don't understand.
It's crazy to think a 10-year-old would be able to get away with that.
Yeah, I don't understand how you would get away with, like, or is it a case...
Also, what are you doing? You're 10 years old, skipping school. What the fuck are you doing?
Apparently hanging out at the... apparently nothing good, that's for damn sure. But that's why I'm wondering if it's a thing where, like, the parents thought they were going to school. Because, you know, like, back in the day, like, they didn't do the thing that they do now where they, like, call home.
Yeah.
If you were out, you were just out. Like, it wasn't a big deal.
You just went to a bus stop. You didn't have, like, every parent in the neighborhood waiting at the bus stop.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what I'm wondering, if they thought they were sending them to school and they ditched. Or if it's a case where, like, because the home life was unstable, that them going to school was just not a priority and overlooked. Like, the parents didn't care enough to send them.
It's crazy either way.
So, yeah. I thought it was weird when I saw attendance issues. I was like, So now, let's fast forward back to James disappearing on February 12th, 1993 at the shopping center. I wrote shipping center. I meant the shopping center. Luckily, even though it was the early 90s, the center did have some cameras, and when police went through the surveillance footage that was later retrieved from that day, this footage was a constant stream of video. It was actually consisting more of stills every few seconds or so, and it wasn't just like a live action type situation recorded. It was literally
early 90s technology. That's what that was.
Yeah, exactly. It was just stills of, every few seconds of people walking around. So on the footage, to their surprise, they actually saw these two small boys hanging around the shopping center, and it appeared to them that these boys were making several attempts to lure little boys away with them. This footage also included one attempt that was almost successful until the mother of that child ended up catching them in the process and stopped Robert and John from walking off with her son, which I think that's fucking disturbing, and I'm really curious to know what
their excuse was.
Yeah. Or
we were just trying to take him to have fun. Like,
yeah.
Okay.
I'm gonna go show him this. Or like, yeah, like what was the conversation? Like, were you like, get the fuck off my kid, or were you like, no, he can't play? Like,
yeah, how do you approach that as a parent? You see two kids trying to think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I don't even know what I would do in that situation, like, besides being like, what the fuck are you doing, little shits?
Away from my kid, you fucker.
Yeah, like, who the fuck are you? So finally, after reviewing the footage, the video of little James Bulger with the boys was discovered. I'm sure most of you have seen it before. If not the video or the stills of it, you pretty much can find anywhere. Just do a quick Google search. It's not really hard. It is a very sad picture, though, or stills, I guess you can say, because we obviously know the outcome in the footage. James just looks so much smaller than the two boys, who themselves look tiny, but he is extra tiny. So when you watch it, it just breaks your heart because I just can't get over the fact of how little and innocent he is. And I just envision him saying hi and being curious about the boys because that's how 2-year-olds are. And, him thinking they're just going to play or some shit, like just so innocently being like, hi, hey.
Excited 2-year-olds.
Yeah, let's be friends.
Yeah.
Like, they want to play with everybody and everything. The innocence. It's just the innocence of it all is just, and to be 10 years old and that malicious to
that fucking sadistic.
Yeah, to knowingly take advantage of a toddler. It's just disturbing is what it is. I don't understand how you get to that point in like that thought process. So
especially at the age of 10.
Yeah, because 10 is young. Like, I think back to 10, and I was like, we were doing stuff, we were running around and stuff like that, and it seems so much older, but now growing up and looking at a 10-year-old, you're like...
10-year-olds are young as shit.
So little. But if you think about what you were doing when you were 10, it seems so much older.
Yeah, because you're double digits.
That was a big deal. You're right, double digits. I wonder if kids still do that. They celebrate the double digits. Okay, so, again, this is the 90s and CCTV is nowhere near what it is today. So once they left the center, that is where, unfortunately, the footage of the 3 does end. So what occurred next would be revealed later once authorities were able to identify and interview the boys, which luckily wasn't too long after the footage was discovered because shortly after releasing the footage, a woman who happened to see it was able to accurately identify John as one of the 2 boys that was last seen with James that day. And then once they had John identified, it wasn't long after that they were able to identify Robert Thompson as the second boy from the video. So this clearly led to the police bringing the 2 boys in for questioning, and by February 20th, the 2 were charged with the brutal murder of young James Bulger. So what is known of the events that took place that day after they lured James away from the center is known mainly from the 2 boys themselves. And then there are some, obviously, eyewitness accounts. Considering their age, I wonder if they fully disclosed what happened or if there is still some parts that they left out. Like, I would think their young brains would end up spilling it all, but I also can't help but wonder if they only shared the parts they felt weren't as bad, because when you're little, you try to downplay it, or you try to make it seem like you weren't,
because you're worried about getting in trouble.
Yeah, and you try to make it so you won't get in as much trouble, you know what I mean? Because they just don't fully understand what they did.
Yeah.
Although I don't know. I question that too. I have large suspicions about that. So after speaking with the boys, it was revealed that where the body of James was discovered was not the first place they took him. According to Robert and John, they first guided James down to what is known as the Leeds and Liverpool Canal, which is located right near the shopping center. One witness did state they saw a young child crying by the canal after James went missing, which led everyone to worry that maybe he had fallen in. So search efforts in the beginning were mainly focusing on that area, but to no avail. The witness was not wrong, though, because the small boy she did see, it was James, and here's where John had James kneel by the water because he was hoping that the little boy was just going to fall in and drown. And then there's also this is also where something must have happened to James, where he was either dropped on his head or something along those lines, because it was reported that he had some injuries on his face and he was bleeding from when they were walking from or taking him from the Leeds to the train tracks where ultimately his body is found. So, basically, all right, so, okay. After he was in the water, or, that's the thing, there's sources tell, there's different variations. So some sources say that they weren't sure if he had an head injury, if the head injury happened before or after he got into the water, and others just stated that John had him kneel by the water. So basically, I'm not sure what happened down at the Leeds, because when I was watching footage of them searching it, it looked like people were like scuba diving in the canal. And if you're afraid he's gonna drown, it clearly had to be deep enough that he couldn't stand in it.
Yeah.
So that's why I don't understand the getting into the water, because I don't really know how he could. It's not like I don't think it would be like a beach where it like gradually like descends. That he could take like a couple of steps in and be standing partially in the water. Like the way it looked from the footage and like what I looked at, it looks like as if like it's just kind of like a boardwalk and then like a dock.
Water.
Yeah, like a dock, and then, or like when we were in Chicago, like that, how it's just water right there. That's kind of what it looked like.
Gotcha.
So, but whatever happened there, obviously he didn't drown there, and something happened to his face. He had a head injury. So the second location that they brought him to was the railroad tracks. And we first spoke about the railroad tracks, that we first spoke about in the beginning, where the Riley brothers were playing when they discovered James. I have to jump back to the boys taking James from one location, though, to the next, because during this time, resources. I cannot speak today. I apologize. I am very tired. Because during this time, sources stated that 38 witnesses ended up coming forward and stating that they saw the little boy with the two older boys, but few chose to get involved. Witnesses stated that James was crying and bleeding from his head, and although most did not get involved, there were a few who chose to at least inquire about what was going on. But Robert and John's response was that James was their little brother, and so the inquiries didn't go beyond that. And I mean, you can't press a 10-year-old on, are you sure that's your brother? And it's a 2-year-old. 2-year-olds ain't gonna be like, yes, no. Yeah, and also it's understandable if you're if you're struggling with a 2-year-old to get him to go somewhere. 2-year-olds tend to, terrible twos? Yeah, they freak out, they cry, and I just keep thinking about how badly James must have been pushing away. And he probably hysterically crying, he's hurt, he's scared, and he couldn't communicate to anybody. Like, even if anybody came up, he couldn't be like, I don't know these kids, they're hurting me. Because you just couldn't probably... 2-year-olds don't have that language skill yet. Yeah, so it's just all heartbreaking. It's just so sad. So once Robert and John made it to the train tracks with James, this is where it gets really bad. Robert and John confessed that they began pushing James to the ground. They were kicking him and throwing bricks at him. They proceeded to throw, this poor baby, paint in his eyes and forced batteries into his mouth. Again, I cannot specify this enough. He is 2 fucking years old. Even as a 10-year-old, 2 is tiny. It's a baby. I'm sorry. The fear that this kid must have been feeling is just heart-wrenching, and I really wish somebody, anybody, was there to just stop it, could see it for a second and stop it. You gotta be a really sadistic 10-year-old to shove batteries in another kid's mouth. Yeah, paint in his eyes. You're throwing bricks at him. He's a baby. What's wrong with you? Evil. I didn't find anything, but I'd be curious to know, I just feel like you had to have been torturing animals. I would assume so. Right? I don't think you start with the torture of a 2-year-old. I feel like you probably... That's a pretty big jump to... I'm gonna go through, that's a... Right, I just feel like you're definitely the type to You're doing something. You're burning shit, setting stuff on fire. You're doing something. Torturing squirrels in the backyard or some shit. Drowning your... Shit. Yeah, I was gonna say drowning your hamsters. There's something. I don't know. And so, honestly, the acts these little shitheads committed that day are just unconscionable and absolutely disgusting. And after the two realized that James was no longer moving, they realized that they now had to cover up what they had done. So this tells me on some level, even in your 10-year-old brain, that you knew what you did was wrong, and you knew that you were probably going to get in trouble because you tried to hide it, right? Yeah, that's definitely, I don't want to get in trouble. And then this is another level too, because then in the 10-year-old brain, they decide, hey, let's make it look like an accident and put him on the train tracks in hopes that, when a train comes by, it'll just look like it'll just look like he was hit by a train. So to make it even worse, a train did come by, which ended up actually severing his body in half. So what those two brothers found was the severed body of, like, the severed, beaten body of a 2-year-old baby.
That is so awful.
Yeah, those kids are, like, fucked up now, too. I was reading...
How could you not be?
I didn't put it in here, but I read articles about how, like, they went on to, like, drug use and just, like, they're seriously, like, fucked up. One of the brothers... has, like, he, like, came out and spoke about it, because he's, like, been in and out of jail. I think he's currently in jail now, or maybe he was released, but he was saying how, like, it traumatized him. The PTSD alone from finding James Bulger royally fucked him and his brother up, and I think they were with, like, 2 friends, too. Like, it just destroyed these kids' lives, because they themselves were young. I think they were only, like, 12 and 13 or some shit.
Even if you're an adult and you come across something like that.
Very true. Very true.
It's still gonna fuck you up.
That I just don't... How do you get that picture out of your brain? Awful. Awful. So, basically then what happened was, obviously, like I said, the train came, but you can't really hide the signs of torture. So regardless of what the train did, the police knew that after the autopsy and everything, like, the police knew looking at the body as well as the autopsy, it ended up showing that the injuries this boy endured were not conducive with just being run over by a train. So it was determined that James had suffered 10 skull fractures, and it was suspected that he was hit in his head with a 22-pound iron bar that was found close to his body. So, to me,
that's a pretty heavy fucking bar for a 10-year-old to swing.
Well, that's what I'm wondering. I was wondering if they both picked it up and dropped it on him.
Oh, I didn't even think of that. Yeah.
Because I feel like alone a 10-year-old probably couldn't lift 22 pounds.
Let alone swing it.
Yeah, like a base, like, you know. So that's what I was thinking. I was thinking they must have had to, like, drop it on him, whether he was standing and they dropped it on him, or they threw it into him. Like, I don't know, but that's the only, like, the way I can wrap my brain around a 22-pound bar being involved. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised, though, because it didn't seem like they really had any concern for what the hell they were doing. I mean, how could you? Right?
Yeah, it's just the weight of it, like, that's the thing that blows me away.
And the last bit of imagery I'm about to give is also horrible, so I sincerely apologize, but it is, important to share everything. So, I did find a source that stated there was, this is heartbreaking, a clear imprint of Robert's shoe on James's face when they found him.
That's fucking horrible.
No words. This story is so fucked. After all these years, it's so fucked. After James was discovered, both the police and the community were besides themselves. There was a mass confusion about what could have happened and why, and no one was able to make sense of how anyone can do this to another human being, let alone a 2-year-old child. So it is no shock that when it was announced that the suspects were 2 10-year-old boys, everyone's understanding of what actually was unfolding was beyond comprehension. On the morning that Robert was picked up, okay, so this gets a little confusing because it's Detective Sergeant Phil Roberts and then it's Robert. So I'm going to do Detective Phil, I think. Or maybe I'll just say the detective. I'll just say the detective. Okay, so on the morning that Robert was picked up, the detective said he was neatly dressed and ready for school. Thompson also only lived a few hundred yards away from the scene of the crime. The detective truly felt that the 2 boys would be ruled out very quickly due to the disbelief that the 2 10-year-old kids could, how could they be responsible for such a heinous crime? But to his shock, he learned this would not be the case. So when the detective told Robert that he was a suspect, the boy's reaction was afraid and panicked, and according to the detective, Robert was seemingly crying, but the boy was not shedding any tears. Initially, the boys blamed each other, and after consistently lying about the events that took place on that day, Robert eventually admitted to what had occurred. The same type of interview pretty much took place with John. He would state lie after lie, but once the detectives told him that his friend Robert had already admitted to it, John's mother actually interjected and told him that he was loved, which must have switched something in him because the small boy started to admit to everything after that. You can actually listen to their interrogations and their confessions, and in the recording you can hear John is hysterically crying while admitting to taking James that day. And the detective describes in that moment when he's crying, confessing, he was just grabbing at his mother to pretty much admitting the horrific acts him and his friend had taken or partaken in that day, or partook that day. On November 24th, 1993, both Robert and John were found guilty of murdering 2-year-old James Bulger, which made them the youngest murderers to ever be convicted in the 20th century. It would be an understatement to say that the court system had no clue how to handle such a case where the defendants were so young. So they did what they felt was best, which was to release as little information as possible. Even as the events were unfolding, no information other than the boys' age was being released, and it wasn't until they were actually convicted and sentenced that information was publicly provided. But even then, it was the bare minimum, and all people knew about these two were their names accompanied with pictures, but nothing else on Robert and John was mentioned. No one was even allowed to speak with anyone affiliated with the case, including their legal teams. And during the trial, the boys were only referred to as A and B. So the court was essentially struggling with the defendants' ages because due to the boys being just 10 years old when the murder took place, the court system couldn't really determine whether children under the age of 14 could truly comprehend what they are doing. And again, like I said, I struggle with this myself. I would like to think that at age 10, one at least understands hurting another. So even if they didn't realize that their actions could lead to death, or they couldn't fully comprehend the finality of death, I believe you still on some level know and understand what you're doing is hurting that child, and therefore to continue hurting him is a huge red flag.
Yeah, because even if it doesn't really matter how old you are, because I feel like 5-year-olds know when they hurt somebody and when they know they're doing something that hurts someone.
Yeah, because you learn at a young age, don't hit, like that.
Yeah.
Or, even how the one grew up in, Lord of the Flies, when your brothers tortured you, it hurt.
Yeah.
So you know that. And then also with, was it John that was contemplating suicide, I think?
Oh, so you know something ends something.
Yeah, so then you do understand the finality of death.
Yeah, because why else would you want to commit suicide?
Yeah.
Unless you think suicide's something different.
Yeah, I just thought of that. If you're... So, I just kind of blew my own mind with that one.
Yeah, yeah.
You're comprehending to some level.
Ending everything, so... How do you think you get there?
Right. So if you understand you can take your own life, then you have to understand that you can take another's.
I would think so.
So, interesting. And again, this is why I go back and forth, though, because I don't know. So, getting back, what the courts felt was that due to the young age of Robert and John, they decided that the boys would only be sentenced to a minimum of 8 years in a juvenile detention center until they turned 18, and in 2001, they would be scheduled for release, which would come with new identities, but this release was strictly contingent on them being completely rehabilitated and with the understanding that they would not break the law again. Okay. What? What?
You guys can leave as long as you say you won't do anything bad.
Pinky promise? I just feel like that's such bullshit. So, obviously no surprise when the public discovered this is their sentencing, they were outraged and wondering where the punishment for these two boys was, and more importantly, where was the fucking justice for James? It's so ridiculous.
I get until they're adults, you want to hold them, and then,
absolutely.
Whatever. But really, that's it. new identities. Just there you go.
Which then it's like to protect them too. So it's like what the fuck there.
Don't worry about the community at large.
Which it's funny because so the public felt, and I have to agree, that the court should have chose to keep the two locked up with one man. This one dude even stated that they should keep them locked up and hang them when they are old enough. But needless to say, needless to say, the outpouring of anger and disappointment the community had regarding how much time the two boys would do is understandable, and in a way, a slap in the face to not only James, but to the whole Bulger family. Like, I lost my son, they lost a brother, a cousin, the whole family and everybody who knew or surrounded by James. Tragedy, and that's here 8 years and don't do it again.
The whole reason that they got there 8 years was because somebody lost something. So we forgetting this with sentencing and stuff. I don't know.
Which I wonder. I just feel like I would be curious to if something like this happened today. Because I just don't know what they're, over there, what they're, how they treat minors even today. I don't know the rules and stuff. So I wonder, though, if something like this was to happen today, how would they go about handling it,
I gotcha.
So this type of sentencing completely reads, like I was saying before, as the courts being more concerned about protecting Robert and John than actually seeking justice for the 2-year-old they brutally and savagely murdered. After they were sentenced, it was not released where the boys would be serving their time. Every bit of information regarding Robert and John remained completely confidential. But it wasn't long before rumors started circulating that while the two were in juvie, they were allowed to leave lockup as well as the premises altogether while under the supervision of staff members. And there is what I saw too, one of the officials that worked there, his explanation for why this was allowed, so clearly it's not a rumor, it happened, but why this was allowed was that it was to help prepare the boys for being in general population when they are finally released from the detention center. So, I mean, I get rehabilitation. But at the same time, again, it seems more like these two kids tortured and murdered a baby, got a slap on the wrist, and sent to boarding school. And I feel like that's hardly a punishment that fits the crime.
Yeah, this doesn't seem like as much of a punishment as one would assume you would get for being found guilty of very horrific things to a child.
Awful murder. You didn't just push him down and he hit his head.
Horrific.
You were sadistic in every sense of the word. So the only information that was released about the boys while they were in juvie was that they were both doing well in school and making great progress and should be released on time. Oh, good. So when news of the boys being released hit the community, of course, outrage once again ensued, igniting a Justice for James campaign to flood the streets. Regardless, the boys were released as planned, and what little is known about the path each of them chose to take is actually vastly different. So John went on to continue a life of crime, and he reoffended only 7 years later in 2008 following his release. So, I mean, the contingent obviously worked. Apparently, he got into a drunken fight and was sentenced to probation and issued a final warning, even though at the time of his arrest, it was reported that he had cocaine on him. I'm not sure how one wiggles out of that. But then, in 2010, he was found to be in possession of images containing sexual abuse of children. And although the sentencing for this crime is unclear, we do know that he spent at least 3 years in jail because his release date for this crime fell somewhere within the year of 2013. So, obviously, 3 years. In 2017, John was arrested yet again for the same charges of possession of child abuse images and sent back to jail, and then this time was sentenced to 40 months in 2018. So while in prison for this, he was attacked with boiling water after some inmates found out who he was. And when I was gathering my references for this episode, I came across a video on, I think it was on the Mirror website, and it was of a guy who was in prison at the same time as John. And according to this guy, he said John showed absolutely no remorse for what he did, and he actually laughed about his past crimes. Pretty interesting.
That says a lot.
So,
rehabilitation.
Yeah, rehabilitation and don't do it again. And I also came across another article where James's mom stated that John has had to have several new identities reissued to him because he basically pulls a Henry Hill and tells people who he is and what he did. So essentially he brags and boasts about the fact that he's the one who killed James and, like, blows up his own spot. So then they're like, oh shit, now we have to, like, relocate you to get you a new identity.
It's not like England's a huge fucking... The UK is not a gigantic place.
Yeah, and, like, it's also how many times do you do that before you say, fuck you? Why are we even continuing to protect this douche?
How many times did they do it for Henry Hill?
I don't remember. But I know it was a handful of times. I remember it being a handful of times. So the article also reported that each time they have to issue a new identity, it costs obviously a lot of money to do so, and that, like, this money is coming from the people of the community. So it's bullshit because taxpayers are paying to protect a person who's not only undeserving of it, but one they never even really wanted to protect in the first place. Isn't that bullshit?
A violent criminal.
Yeah. Like
an extremely violent criminal.
Who has gone on to show, like, yeah, maybe he hasn't, that we know of, done anything similar to the actions that started all of this, but you've done nothing to show that you want to even make an improvement. Like, you're still committing criminal acts. You're still being a douche. You're still, and
you're still fucking
not
with
remorseful.
Because you're just doing you're being found with all the child stuff.
Oh, yeah. So it's like, you clearly are a fucking douche. So, what the fuck? Oh, yeah, I can't remember also the exact amount, but in total, it was a shit ton of money that apparently has been wasted on him. Yeah, I wish because I wasn't...
Yeah, because it's all government shit, so everything costs more.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Yeah, I wish I could, I would have, really thoroughly went through, took down the details, but I kind of just quickly read the article and wasn't really planning on putting it in, and then it kind of just, transpired that way, so I wanted to mention it.
Went off on a tangent.
Yeah, so, he clearly, obviously, again, has issues and should probably just remain in prison. Luckily the courts think so too, because back in 2020, the parole board did deny his request, and then as recent as December 13th of 2023, they denied another request. They stated that they were not satisfied that release at this point would be safe for the protection of the public. I think that's probably an accurate statement. Apparently, though, after hearing this, John became irate and began screaming and shouting at the board, claiming he was a victim of a miscarriage of justice. Like, fuck off.
Wow.
Fuck off, right?
Wow. You're the victim.
Such a douche. I can't say it enough. Since his denial, he has vowed to fight the decision and will be appealing, but I think it's safe to say that the appeal will most likely be denied as well, because fuck him. Robert, on the other hand, has chosen a much more quiet way of life. As a result, even less is known about him. So, but what has essentially been revealed about his later years consists of him living a very, very simple life with his boyfriend, who, according to sources, says he is aware of Robert's past and he's aware of this prior crime. He has also never reoffended, which I often, with stuff like this, I wonder if it was, if it wasn't for him meeting John back in 1993, would Robert have ever committed such a crime or even a crime? I just think it's interesting.
It's weird you go from brutal murder to nothing ever again. Not even a theft charge or anything.
Yeah, and I also find it weird because I know as when he was little he was committing.
Yeah, fuck rehabilitation.
Well, I was gonna say when he was little before all this happened, they did mention obviously shoplifting. So yeah, but when I don't know. I feel like shoplifting is kind of common for kids. You know?
Well, it's like, what'd you fucking steal?
Candy bar. Yeah, like, so for me, when I'm thinking crime, I'm thinking more like heavy duty shit.
Yeah, violence. Whatnot.
Yeah. So I also thought it was interesting that out of the two, Robert was the one who had the worst childhood, and yet he managed to turn his life completely around. Isn't that interesting?
Choices you make.
Yeah. And I also think it's just one of those crazy things where it just shows that you just never know how anything's going to affect anybody. You never know how people are going to develop, and it's crazy how that happens. So till this day, very little is out there about the two child murders. I mean, even with all of John's, obviously all the stuff that's out about him has to do with all his crimes, but outside of that, like, there's hardly anything really about him. And same thing with Robert. Very little is known. I think, though, but what we do know, what we were just talking about, shows that rehabilitation is obviously possible for some, impossible for others. And at the end of the day, there's still a life that was cut way too short for reasons that are still unknown. Robert and John have never provided anyone with an actual reason for why they did what they did. The only thing that may be close to a reason, which isn't really a reason at all, is that Robert stated Robert did say that John would often suggest getting a kid lost, quote unquote, to him. And considering there were other attempts made on, other little boys that day, it is sad to say that what happened to James just may simply be a wrong place, wrong time situation. And if it didn't happen to him, it may have easily been some other child that we would be talking about today, which that alone is just horrendous to think about, and it will always remain imaginable.
Yeah, that's god-awful. Gut-wrenching.
And I'm like,
to think of that.
The whole thing was like, oh, let's just get a kid lost. Like, again, see, like, that's not a reason, though. Why? It's like, why do you...
It's not normal for a 10-year-old.
Yeah, like, why do you want to do that? Why do you think that's funny? I don't... And then...
It's crazy. It's evil.
Yeah, it's evil, because you're deliberately trying to...
You can't really... I feel like I don't buy it. I don't understand what would happen. You're trying to get somebody lost. You know it. You
know what you're doing. There's it's purpose. That's premeditated. That is a purposeful act. Let's find a little kid and get him lost and fuck his life up. And which is why I want to know, when did it, or why did it transpire to the fight, like the torturing, like the beating him up? Why did it have to go to that? Why couldn't you just fucking leave him at a bus station and walk away if you wanted to get a kid lost? Why did it transpire to that? Like, that's
Maybe
something
that's
else.
what he meant when he said he wanted to get him lost.
I don't know what that means.
Like, get a kid lost. Maybe he meant kill him. Get a kid and kill him.
Oh, I don't see the connection there, though.
What do you mean?
Get a kid lost. How does that compute to...
Well, clearly he wanted to get a kid and do something. Maybe he was saying get a kid lost. To him was get a kid and we could kill him.
Oh.
You see what I'm saying?
I see what you're saying. I don't understand the connection, but okay. Okay. But anyway, that concludes this tragic event. I mean, it's just still to this day, it hits just as hard. When you hear the name, and you know the story, it just breaks your heart. So, like I said, this concludes this episode. However, before we go, I'm going to hand it off to Adam for our shithead of the week. So, Adam, who do you have for us?
I forgot to write the name down, but it's not important because it's from Florida, Lee County, Florida.
Oh, Lee County.
Yeah, it's happened last year. And there were domestic violence charges in this, but it is funny because the domestic violence charge is this chick threw a soda bottle at a guy's head, at her ex-boyfriend's head.
It's like Tanya Harding beating the guy, what's his name, the Luli with the frying pan.
So I thought that was funny. So I would asshole, whatever. So this chick gets arrested for allegedly breaking into her boyfriend's home, vandalizing it, and then he came and they got into it, whatever. She supposedly threw a bottle at him. Yeah, she also got charged with criminal mischief, damage to property, less than $200, because she dumped pickled pork all over the guy's fucking couch.
Oh, I was waiting for you to say that she like pulled an Amber Heard and like took a shit somewhere. Wait, pickled pork?
Yeah, it's like a Creole Cajun thing that's used in like collard greens, red beans, and rice and stuff.
I have never even heard of pickled pork.
It sounds like it's similar to like bacon, but it's chunks and stuff instead of like strips.
Oh my god!
And she put
I just
it
threw
all
it in my
over
mouth.
this fucking couch.
So that's the damages. The damages is she...
I'm assuming when she trashed the place, that was the trashing of the place, was dumping pickled pork all over.
Pickled pork, and she assaulted him with a can of soda or some shit. What?
A bottle of soda.
A bottle, like a plastic 2-liter.
Threw it at his head.
Well, I mean, if it's full, those things are heavy. That could probably do some serious damage. Wow. Pork. Thank you for lifting us up. Is that all for the shit hit of the week?
Yeah.
Oh my god. Gotta love Florida. They deliver when, they're always serving. So sweet. All right, guys. Thank you so much for listening. And until next week, make your dash count and don't be a douche.
Goodbye.
See ya.